I have $230,000 invested in the stock market, and here's exactly what I would do if I was starting from zero. I've been wanting to do this video for a while because I often get questions about where to start, what do I begin with, what is the most important thing, and it can be hard for me to put myself back at the beginning of my financial journey and to remember everything that I did and all of the steps that I took to get to where I am today. So I went deep into the archives of my memory and I pulled out everything that I did that I would recommend that you do if you're starting at zero. Firstly, I want to talk about privilege because not everyone actually starts at zero. What does this mean? Well, a lot of people are starting at negative because they have debt. So I wanted to acknowledge some of my privilege before we get into it because that has a huge impact on your financial journey and what it's going to look like. So for myself, I consider myself to have a lot of financial privilege. When I was growing up, I never heard my parents worry about money, and that is a gift. I also had everything paid for pretty much. I did get my first job when I was 12 years old, which we are going to talk about. I went to university and my parents paid for everything, my tuition, my textbooks, my living expenses. I was gifted a vehicle when I was 16 years old. I ended up driving that vehicle for 13 years, so I got my money's worth out of it. But I had it pretty easy on the money front. I will say I had some other struggles in life, but it wasn't to do with money. When I was in my early 20s, I also received a small inheritance from my grandpa when he passed away. My father passed away when I was younger, and so when my grandpa passed away, the money that would have gone to my dad got split up between me and my two sisters. So in the grand scheme of things, I consider myself to have a lot of privilege. I've never had debt, which is something that not a lot of people can say. So I'm very grateful for that. And I will have debt in the future. I am planning to buy a house, so I'm gonna have a mortgage, but the very fact that I came out of university with money, not at zero and not at negative, is something that put me a little bit further ahead than some other people. So when we're going through this video, I'm going to be talking about starting from zero, but I do acknowledge that a lot of people are starting at a negative amount, and paying off debt is just not something that I have experience with, so I don't feel comfortable giving you tips on that. Also, if it's not obvious already, I'm not a financial professional, so none of this stuff is prescriptive. It is just for educational, conversational purposes and to hear about someone else's journey, but none of it is me saying that you should go and do exactly this and it's gonna get you X result. Okay? Okay. So your money journey is going to start pretty much from the time that you're born. When you are a young child, what you hear about money, the environment that you grow up in, and the sentiment towards money actually really does impact you. And there's lots of interesting studies about that. But for the sake of this video, we're going to start around like teenager age, because that's the time when a lot of people will get their first job. And that's when your money habits start forming. And it's really going to sort of set you up for the rest of your personal finance journey. So if we go back to my teenage years, or I guess my preteen years, I was 12 years old and I don't know why, but I was convinced that I wanted to get a job. And I went to my mom and I said, "Mom, I want to get a job." And she said, "Why? You have your whole life to work." And I said, "I want a job. I want to start earning my own money." I think it was partly to do with money, but partly because I've always been someone who is drawn to work and I have a strong work ethic. And I guess that work ethic started when I was 12 years old. And it's something that I'm really thankful for. And it's something that has helped me in my life. But at 12 years old, I was convinced I wanted to get a job. I wrote my mom this huge letter convincing her, and she finally said yes. The tricky thing is that you had to be 13 legally to get a job. So I actually went to the farmer's market because that was a place where they were allowed to hire at 12 years old, which looking back is way too young. But I went around, I gave out my resume. I was just this young kid, and this one stand, Going Nuts, if you live in Calgary, you might still see their products in the grocery store. Going Nuts hired me. I would work every Sunday and sometimes Saturday. I remember on a Sunday, I think I'd make around $80. And this was, how many years ago is this? This is 20 years ago. So that was a lot of money and I loved that job. They were really great to me, and that was my first experience in the working world, and I do think that it taught me a lot. Obviously at the time I didn't have any bills to pay for. I could just take that $80 and I could just buy myself whatever I wanted. And that was part of the fun of getting a job at such a young age. But from there, I then went on to work all throughout high school, all throughout university, and this really helped me to build my early money habits. So to build your money habits, you have to have money coming in, of course. So your first step is going to be to build an income. And this can come at various points in your life, but I would recommend for you or your kids or your niece or your nephew to get a part-time job while you're still in school, whether that's high school, definitely in university. It teaches you so many skills, and it is like the perfect practice for you to manage your money because you don't yet have as many bills as you're going to have in the future. You likely still will have bills. Some people have to pay for their university. You might have a car payment, you have a cell phone bill, you may have rent when you're, early in university, but it will be easier for you to start managing small money and get the hang of that so that when you're managing big money in the future, you'll have those habits set. And that was something that I kept in mind pretty much, since I was a teenager, was like, I'm trying to build these good habits so that as I get more and more income, those habits still stay and I'm able to continue to, put money away and not just spend it all once I get it in my hands. Yeah, so in this period of time, I would say that this is for developing your skills, learning, and putting in some reps, putting in some practice. So if you have a part-time job, how much money do you make? And then what are you gonna do with that money? When you get a paycheck, how much is gonna go into savings? How much is gonna go into, fun money, all of those things. Another great job to have is either babysitting or dog walking. I was big into babysitting. I ran that like a business. Like I was booked up Friday, Saturday nights, and I loved that because I'd be watching TV and the kids would be in bed and I'd be like counting the hours that I was there and thinking of, how much money they would give me. When I was babysitting, the going rate was $5 an hour. So I remember being like, okay, I'll probably get $35. And if they would give me, two 20s, I'd be ecstatic. So I just like look back on those memories of me working and earning money at an early age. And I'm very nostalgic about them because I could just see how that was shaping who I am today. So anyways, however you want to make an income, I would say getting started earlier than later is going to help you by giving you practice and giving you exposure to managing your money. So the next thing that you're gonna need to do is to build your foundation. And now for me, your foundation would be your system that you're gonna use to manage your finances. Your foundation also includes an emergency fund. This is very important. And I would consider that sinking funds are also part of your foundation, particularly for big bills. So let's go through them. The first is a system for you to manage your money. So there is so many different ways that you can manage your money, but the most important thing is that you're actually managing it. Some people are, not aware of their finances. They don't really have any system for tracking or keeping things organized. They don't have a system for reviewing anything. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. But again, as early as you can, as soon as you start making money, should really be when you have a system in place of how you're going to track your money, when you're going to review, when you review, what are you looking for, and also how you're going to get set goals. So for myself, I did not have a system for tracking my money until I was about 25. So this is your sign to get started earlier than I did. It's really going to make your life so much easier, and it's honestly going to allow you to accumulate wealth faster than I did. And that's what I want for you all. So my system, I started tracking my expenses. This is something that I would recommend that you start with, because when you start earning an income, you're gonna know exactly how much you're earning, right? Like for me at babysitting, I knew this many hours, I was getting $35. When you get a part-time job, you may have variable hours, but you know pretty much what is coming in, but a lot of us don't know what is going out. So it's very important for you to know exactly what your average monthly expenses are so that you can compare what you're bringing in to what you're spending. Because if you're spending more than you're bringing in, you're starting off, you're playing a dangerous game, and it's not something that you want to continue with. That will happen from time to time, especially with access to credit, but we don't want to make that the habit. So the very first thing that I did in 2021, I think, or maybe 2020, I think 2021, was I started tracking every single thing that I spent money on. Now, apps nowadays make this really easy for you to do. Like your credit card and even your debit card should have an app that you can go into and you can see all of your purchases. And I like to manually track these into a spreadsheet. I use Notion. I do sell an expense tracker. It's very basic, but it has helped me so much over the last 5 years. And I like to manually input my expenses because then I get to think about the purchase twice and I get to think about, was this worth it? I get to kind of consider how I feel about that purchase and write down any additional notes. So I would say, you know, you may have your expenses tracked in various different apps, but I would recommend putting them into a central system. This is also amazing because for me, I could tell you exactly how much on average I spent on groceries every month for the past 5 years because I have all that data that I can just go back and see. And that's not something that you can do if you're just relying on, you know, your credit card app to give you those numbers. And then with any good system, you have to know how you're going to use the system. So when are you going to be inputting your expenses? When are you going to be reviewing them? What are you looking for? So I think that when I first got started my personal finance journey, I was checking in a little too often. You don't need to track your expenses or look at your money every single day, although I would recommend doing it once a week. Something that you need to be looking at is your credit cards and making sure that there's no like fraudulent expenses on them. But in terms of, you know, really like doing the administrative side of tracking your spending and your income, you don't have to do it that often, just as long as you do it sometimes. So that could be once every couple of days, it could be once a week. I would recommend definitely every month looking back and seeing, you know, what went well in the month, what you can improve on, how much you spent, you know, for example, on groceries. Maybe the next month you want to cut down a little bit, or maybe you spent a little bit too much on eating out. So the next month you want to cut down on that. So I would say that you want to have sort of like a weekly review and a monthly review, and that should be plenty. If you get too obsessed like me in the very beginning, it's gonna be a hard habit to fix later on. Let me just tell you that. So the other thing in this foundation is an emergency fund. This is so important. This is so important. Before you start getting that money in as income, spending it on whatever you'd like, or investing it, or even saving it, you have to have a fund that is there in case of emergencies that can take care of you if you get yourself into some sort of an emergency. We can kind of debate back and forth, like what is an emergency? An emergency would be losing your job, getting into a car accident, you know, your stove breaks and you need to buy a new one. Things that you cannot anticipate, and they are sort of those like losses in life where when it happens, it stings really bad. And what you don't want is you don't want that sting plus the bill. You want to be able to cover that. Most experts are gonna say keep 3 to 6 months of your living expenses in an emergency fund. Now, this isn't your average monthly expenses. This is your I need to pay expenses. So that's your rent, your groceries, your insurance, your car payment, things that you need to live. You want to have 3 to 6 months of that in your emergency fund. If you're a freelancer and you own your own business, you may want to have a larger cushion, but it's all really personal preference, again, as long as you have it. So before you start playing around with your money, before you start investing, make sure that you have an emergency fund. You also want your emergency fund to be easily accessible, so you want it to be liquid. So you can put this in a high yield savings account to get a couple % interest, but you don't want to invest in the stock market, and you don't want it somewhere that you can't easily access. You want to be able to access it the day of the emergency. The next thing that I would say is part of your foundation is sinking funds for big bills. So one that comes up for me is my car insurance. I like to pay my car insurance yearly because then I can pay with my credit card and I can get credit card points. And this is around $2,000. So this is not an expense that I just want to wing. So I actually have auto savings set up. So every paycheck, $100 goes into the sinking fund so that when my car insurance is due, I have that money and I'm not scrambling to figure out where to get it. You want to have your sinking funds for bills like this that you know are coming up, because you don't want to use your emergency fund for something that you could have predicted was coming up and you had time to prep for. So once you have a system for tracking your expenses, once you have your emergency fund built, and once you have some sinking funds set up for things that you know are going to be planned spending, that is your foundation and you're off to a really great start. And then what we talk about above and beyond this is just like the cherry on top, and you're just going to slay your money game after this. Okay, so the next step is investing. Now, obviously in this video, I said that I have $230,000 invested in the stock market, which still surprises me. I will say I'm 32 years old. I started to work it when I was 12, so I've been at this for 20 years. So whatever stage you are at, just don't compare yourself to me or anyone else. Again, we all have different circumstances, but how did I get to that number? Well, I learned about investing. I got really serious about investing. I made some goals for myself and I just did it for 6 years. No, longer than that. Yeah, probably about 6 years, being really, really, really dedicated to it. So how did I even start? Well, the very first thing that you want to start with is if you have an employer, you want to check to see if they have any sort of investment match. So what is that? So if you live in the States, that would be like a 401k match. If you live in Canada, that would be an RRSP match. Basically what this is it's free money. Basically, if you tell your employer, I want to take X percentage off of my paycheck to go right into my retirement account, your employer is going to match it and put that in as well. So you're just getting more money. And it also forces you to invest and save for your future. And it's coming off of your paycheck before you can even touch it. So that is number one. I want you to check to see if that is going on. If that is going on, you must set that up right away. I've never had that, and so you must set it up because I don't have it, okay? I'm living vicariously through you. So that's the number one thing. Before I even get into how you want to automate your investments and how you're actually going to build up that very large sum of money in your investments, I want to talk quickly about why you want to invest. A lot of people can be nervous about investing. They think it's like gambling, and some of it can be, but not the kind that I'm recommending to you. Some people think it's the same as saving money, and it is not. So basically, investing is you putting money into the stock market, for example. It can also be other things like real estate. You putting money in with the hope that that money grows in a couple of years' time. So when I talk about investing, I really am trying to encourage long-term investing. So when we think about gambling, when people say investing is like gambling, they're really referring to day trading, where basically people are trying to predict what price different stocks are going to be at. They're making trades daily, weekly, monthly, and they're trying to make a profit that way. I don't recommend that you do that. It is not something that a lot of people find success in. They have done studies where they've had literally a monkey pick stocks and then someone who is like a skilled financial advisor pick stocks, and the monkey did not, or I think maybe the monkey outperformed. I was gonna say it either outperformed or performed the same. So you don't wanna try and game the market, okay? But what you do wanna do is put money into the market so that it can grow, especially for retirement. And if you're watching this video and you are in your teens or your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, this is your time to put away money into the stock market so that when you retire, you're gonna have a lot more money than what you put in now. If you were simply saving that money, it would be the same. So if you put in $20,000 into the stock market when you're at age 30, with like the average rate of return, when you turn 65, you would have this much money. If you saved it, you would have 20,000. So we want to invest, but we want to invest in a smart way. So something that you can do, which is what I did when I first started, was you can use a robo advisor. What this is you sign up, you put your risk level. So basically how tolerant are you to your money kind of going up and down in value? And when do you want to take the money out? If you're in your 20s or 30s and you're taking this money out in retirement, if you feel comfortable to do so, you can do 10 out of 10 risk level, which is what I did. Product that I recommend is Wealthsimple. I have all of my investments with Wealthsimple. I will have my referral code down below, so you'll be able to get, I believe, $25 if you sign up using that link. And they have a great robo advisor option, so you can get started that way. Another way that you can do it is you can do your own investing, so that's called self-directed investing. And what I would recommend to do is to buy ETFs. ETFs are like baskets of many different stocks, so you're not putting literally all of your eggs in one basket, okay? You are investing in a bunch of different stocks, and so this diversifies your portfolio, so your swings won't be as dramatic because, for example, you're going to have stocks from all different industries. So if one industry is high and one is low, it's going to kind of equal out. So I would recommend doing some research on what popular ETFs are. There's so much information out there, which I will not go over because, again, not a financial advisor, and it's very easy for you to do your own research and select what is best for you, because that is all that really matters. So we want to invest because our money is worth a lot more if we put it in now. So there's this chart, the wealth multiplier by the money guy. Once I saw this chart, I was like, okay, yeah, we're really going to try and grind it out in my 20s and 30s. So first you have to figure out, why you're doing it. And then you have to just like put your foot on the gas and do it. So how I would recommend doing that is automating your investments. So if you don't have your employer match, you can kind of do this for yourself, where basically on the day that your paycheck hits, you can have Wealthsimple or whatever platform you're using, pull out $100, $200, $500, $1,000 and invest it straight away. So it's basically doing the same as what the employer match would do. And so you're not really having to do much. You're setting up the auto investments and you're letting it run. And this is like, honestly, the key to what has allowed me to put away so much money. There is one other thing that has allowed me to get to the number that I'm at, which I will share shortly, but putting on your auto investments is amazing because the only thing that you have to do is to not turn off your auto investments. Otherwise, you're good to go and you're going to see your investments just grow and grow and grow and grow. Sometimes they might be down. Right now, they're a little bit down. The stock market is down. But once you become a more seasoned investor, you'll be okay with those ups and downs. But automating your investments is going to be like the key to building wealth. If I were to say, do one thing from this video, it would be to turn on auto investments. Okay? Okay, so what was the other key to building this wonderful portfolio? That was earning extra income and investing it. So this one is tough because it's honestly tough to do. Getting a job and keeping a job in today's market is not easy. Getting a job that pays well is not easy. And so that I want to be your first priority. So for me, again, all throughout my teenage years, I was always building, trying to get experience in university. I tried to do as many internships as possible so that when I graduated, I was able to get a job. And I was very lucky and grateful that that happened. Then from that job, I worked really hard, I networked, then I got my other job. So your main priority is going to be to have a job, build a career, have a stable source of income. This could be, a 9-to-5 job, or this could be a freelance business. However you want to earn your money is up to you, and all of it, every job is, a respectable job. And so however you want to do that, you do that. This step is to make a little bit more money on top of that. So this would come in from a side hustle. This could be, you're learning new skills or you're getting more accreditation and you're going to be paid more in your regular job. So anything that you can do to supplement your income. So if you earn on average $4,000 a month, what can you do to earn $6,000 a month? It's not quite as simple as that. But for me, my side hustle is content creation. I have been doing content on Instagram since it was first a thing, and then on TikTok and now on YouTube. And it's something that I'm really passionate about and I love doing it. And it does earn me a little bit of income, which is amazing. And the reason why this has like supercharged my investments is that I rely on my regular 9-to-5 job to pay my bills because my influencer income is not guaranteed. So I've got all of my bills taken care of for there and my auto investments. When I get an influencer brand deal, for example, I'm able to take that money and invest all of it. And this just like supercharges my investments. I've really seen it in action. To put this into perspective, at the beginning of this year, I'm gonna have to go and check, but I think I'll put the number on the screen of what my investments were at. And now we're middle of October and I have $230,000 invested. So this is what I was at. And I did not put that much money into the stock market. The stock market grew, but what really supercharged it is like having my auto investments, just regularly feeding it, and then taking these lump sums and just like throwing it over, and it's just gonna like, you'll notice that once you hit $100,000 invested, you're gonna notice it speed up, speed up, speed up, and you're gonna be shocked. You're gonna be shocked, and it's gonna be like a game every day to go and look at your money, okay? So I would say, how can you bring in more money? And then when you do bring in more money, Don't go and spend it all. You can spend a little bit of it. The important thing too is if you're earning money through a side hustle, for example, you will likely have to put away money for taxes. So for me, I put away 30% of everything that I bring in my side hustle because I do have to pay that to the government in taxes. I'll spend a little, but most of the time I put most of it in investments, and that is something that has really helped me. Okay, so now you have a system for managing your money. You're tracking your expenses. You have an emergency fund. You have sinking funds. You have a stable income coming in. You have a side hustle, so you're making some additional income. You have auto investments turned on. When you get additional income, whether that's through a side hustle, birthday money, whatever, I don't really care, you put that into your investments as well. Now what? Now what? This is probably the hardest step, and that is time, patience, and sacrifice. So the time piece is huge. Sometimes we want to see results. Well, actually all the time we want to see results right away, but working towards something meaningful does not happen right away. And you have to put in really consistent effort for longer than you think you need to before you're really going to see the fruits of your labor. Think of it like planting seeds in your garden. The next day, you're not going to see it sprouted, but in a couple weeks, you'll probably see a little sprout. And then a couple weeks later, it will be growing. And then a couple weeks later, oh, you may have a flower. And then a couple weeks later, maybe you have the fruit. That is what investing is. And you need to stay the course. Something that really helps me is watching financial YouTubers, reading books, listening to podcasts to keep myself motivated, because it can be really easy to see people on Instagram taking luxury vacations and be like, oh, I want to do that. But really, that's not my value. I mean, I love to travel, but like that's not what I value. What I value is like long-term security for myself. So you want to try and keep yourself motivated in whatever way that you can. To close out this video, I just want to be cozy. So I'm sitting on my living room floor and I wanted to leave you with a little love note, a little message. I hope that this video helped you. I wish that I could give you the exact formula. I wish I could give you, the secret key to building wealth. I don't have that. I don't think anyone has that, but following these steps and investing is gonna get you a lot closer to your goals than if you didn't do these things. So I'm gonna leave some resources in the description box, podcasts, YouTube channels, books. I really recommend books. Like I learned about finance and investing through books, and just work hard at it, know your why, stay the course, and I see financial abundance in your future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and comment down below what your investing journey is. Like, have you gotten started investing? Are you going to start? Let me know what's up, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.